We all want to be happy, right? It's this kind of universal quest.
Absolutely.
But, in this age with just so much self-help advice, endless information, how do you even cut through the noise?
Yeah.
How do you find real answers about living a good life? What actually, works?
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
Well, today we're diving deep into a book that kind of promises just that. To change your life. Unlock real happiness. It's called The Courage to be Disliked. This is a huge Japanese phenomenon. Millions of people have read it globally.
And what makes this book really stand out, I think, isn't just its pretty radical ideas. It's the format. It's captivating. It's not your typical self-help manual, definitely not a dry psychology textbook. It unfolds as this dialogue, right, between a pretty skeptical young guy and this wise philosopher.
Yeah, almost confrontational sometimes.
Exactly. And that approach, it makes these really profound, complex psychological ideas, well, incredibly accessible. It sort of draws you in, makes you grapple with the ideas alongside the characters.
And the core of it all is Alfred Adler's psychology. Now, he's often called one of the three giants, Freud, Jung, and Adler.
Right.
But he's surprisingly overlooked, isn't he?
He really is, which is strange because his ideas, people say they were 100 years ahead of their time.
Wow.
Yeah. Basically, Adler argued that our present choices, our social connections, not just dredging up the past, those are the real drivers.
So less about why and more about what now.
Precisely. And actually, his thinking has subtly influenced some massive bestsellers you probably know, like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Really?
Yeah, and Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. Adler's fingerprints are kind of there, if you look closely.
Huh. Okay, so our mission with this deep dive then is to guide you, the listener, through the core ideas of Adlerian psychology as they're presented in The Courage to be Disliked.
Right. So by the end, you should have a really clear sense of its, let's say, revolutionary claims. And hopefully you can decide if this book is the right fit for your journey.
Is it worth your time, your money? Let's find out. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with maybe the biggest bombshell in the book. For me, anyway. The idea that trauma. Well, that trauma, as we usually think about it, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's a big one. It hits hard.
So it challenges everything we're taught about cause and effect, right?
Yeah.
How does Adler even begin to explain that away?
Well, it comes down to what Adler called teleology, which is basically the study of purpose. It's a total shift from etiology, which is all about cause and effect, looking back into the past. So Adler isn't asking why you are the way you are or what caused this thing in your past. He's asking, what goal are you trying to achieve right now with this behavior or this emotion?
Okay, hang on. So it flips the script. Like instead of being a victim of the past.
Exactly. You become the architect of your present. It puts the power back in your hands right now.
Okay, let's make that concrete. The book gives some examples, like the friend who's a shut-in, crippled by anxiety and fear. Normally we'd say, oh, past trauma caused this. Maybe bullying, maybe something at home.
Etiological view, yeah.
But the philosopher in the book says, no. The anxiety and fear are actually a means to a goal, like maybe getting parents' attention,
right,
or avoiding the potential judgment of, just being out there in society.
Precisely. The anxiety serves a purpose for that person now. It protects them from something they fear more, perhaps the potential failure or judgment in social interaction. It shifts focus from, I am this way because of my past, to, I am choosing this way, unconsciously perhaps, to achieve current goal. It moves you away from victimhood towards, agency. Personal agency.
That's wow. And it applies to anger, too. The book talks about fabricated anger.
Right. We often feel anger just washes over us, uncontrollable.
Yeah, like I lost my temper.
But Adlerian psychology says it's often a tool we use. The example in the book is so vivid. The mother yelling at her daughter.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
The phone rings, and boom, instantly polite, calm voice for the caller. Hangs up, right back to yelling.
So the anger wasn't uncontrollable at all.
It was a tool, a performance almost. Used to make the daughter submit to assert dominance. It served a purpose in that moment.
That's really liberating, in a way. Scary, but liberating. The implication is huge, then. If your present and future aren't chained to your past.
Then you have free will. Right now.
The book literally says no matter what has occurred in your life up to this point, it should have no bearing at all on how you live from now on. You decide your life here and now.
And that ties straight into the idea that your lifestyle is a choice.
Okay, define lifestyle in Adler's terms. It's not just about like fancy cars or vacations.
No, not at all. It's your fundamental way of being, your tendencies of thought, action, your whole worldview, how you see life, how you see yourself. It's deeper than personality.
And the book says we chose this, maybe unconsciously, around age 10.
That's the idea. And the really crucial part is you can choose it again, right now.
But, okay, if it's a choice, why do so many of us feel stuck? I mean, you hear listeners thinking, easier said than done.
Right.
If we have this free will, what's stopping us from changing?
Well, the book's pretty blunt about it. It says it's simply easier and more secure to be just the way one is.
Ah, the comfort zone.
Exactly. Change brings uncertainty, anxiety.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. And this is where Adlerian psychology really becomes a psychology of courage.
Courage, okay.
The book argues that not having the courage to change, to face that discomfort, well, that's actually the courage not to be happy.
Wow. The courage not to be happy.
Yeah. Think about the example of the aspiring novelist. He always says, oh, if only I had time, I'd write my masterpiece.
Right, the excuse.
But the philosopher suggests he's choosing not to write to avoid the risk. The risk of criticism, the risk of finding out he's not as talented as he hopes. He keeps the if only excuse alive because it's safer than potentially failing.
So it's about having the courage to face potential disappointment, potential dislike even.
Precisely. It's a huge challenge to how we usually protect ourselves.
Okay, so we've got this idea that you choose your mindset, your lifestyle. Now, how does this connect to relationships? Because Adler makes this massive claim. All problems are interpersonal relationship problems.
All of them, yeah.
Even things like self-dislike.
Yeah.
How can hating yourself be about other people? That sounds really inward-looking.
It does sound counterintuitive, doesn't it? But the book frames self-dislike as a kind of a strategic move, a way to avoid getting hurt in relationships before you even start.
An excuse again.
Basically, yes. Think about the example of the student with the fear of blushing.
Right. She can't confess her feelings because she might blush.
She believes that, but the philosopher suggests she actually needs that symptom, the blushing. It's her ready-made excuse to avoid the risk of rejection. It keeps the, if only my blushing wasn't an issue, possibility alive, which feels safer than actually putting herself out there.
So our own perceived flaws can be shields we use to avoid relationship risks. That's subtle.
It is. And Adler also flips our view of inferiority and superiority. He says feelings of inferiority aren't objective facts, they're subjective interpretations.
So like being short isn't inherently bad.
Exactly. It's only inferior if you compare yourself to taller people and decide it's a disadvantage. You assign the meaning.
So what's the shift here? How should we view those feelings then?
The powerful insight is that those feelings, when they're healthy, are actually good. They can be a launch pad.
A launch pad for what?
For healthy striving, for growth. What Adler calls the pursuit of superiority. But crucially, this isn't about being better than others.
Ah, okay. It's about
being better than your past self, improving, moving forward. That's the healthy version.
So when does it become unhealthy? What's the inferiority complex then?
That's when you start using those feelings of inferiority as an excuse. Like saying, oh, I can't succeed because I didn't go to college.
The if only again.
Right. If only I were better educated, then I'd be successful. It avoids taking responsibility now. And the flip side is the superiority complex.
Yeah.
The boasting, the arrogance. The book says people only boast because they actually feel inferior underneath.
Even bragging about misfortune.
Yeah, the book mentions bragging about one's own misfortune as a way to control others, make them feel guilty or obligated. It's uncomfortable, but it rings true sometimes, doesn't it?
It really does. This leads right into the idea that life is not a competition.
Crucial point.
If you see life as a competition, then everyone else is basically an enemy.
Right. You can't find peace. You're constantly comparing, judging. Healthy striving comes from comparing yourself to your ideal self, not to the person next to you.
And this competitive view fuels power struggles, right? Anger escalates into just wanting to win the argument, not find the truth.
Exactly. And that can spiral into revenge cycles. The example of a child acting out delinquency as revenge against parents who are too controlling. It's a destructive pattern.
So what's the way out if you find yourself in that kind of struggle?
Disengage. Just refuse to play the power game. Step out of the competition.
Which relates to admitting fault, doesn't it? The book says admitting you're wrong isn't defeat.
Not at all. In that competitive I'm right, you're wrong mindset, admitting fault feels like losing. But Adler says true strength is being able to say, I was mistaken, offer an apology, step down from the power struggle. That's not defeat. It's choosing connection over winning.
So all these interpersonal dynamics, they're central to tackling what Adler calls the life tasks. What are those again?
Work, friendship, and love. These are the fundamental interpersonal arenas we all have to navigate.
And going back to the shut-in example, it's not the work itself they're avoiding, is it?
No, it's the relationships involved in work, dealing with colleagues, bosses, potential criticism, teamwork, all that interpersonal stuff. Avoiding the task is really about avoiding the relationship challenges inherent in it.
Okay, so all problems are interpersonal. Got it. Now, the book shifts to the path to freedom, and this starts with another really provocative idea, denying the need for recognition.
Yeah, basically saying you don't need praise. In fact, one must not seek recognition.
Whoa. That feels almost unnatural in our society. We thrive on likes, validation, praise.
It's a radical departure. Adler critiques reward and punishment education. If you only do good things to get praised, or avoid bad things to not get punished,
you're living by someone else's rules.
Exactly. Your value is tied to external validation. You're not truly free. Breaking that chain is key.
And this connects to one of Adler's most practical, empowering tools, the separation of tasks. This is where it gets really useful, I think, deciding whose task is this?
Absolutely. This is where the rubber meets the road. The classic example is the child studying.
Right. Studying is the child's task.
Parents can help, provide support, create a good environment, but they can't force the child to study, and they shouldn't take responsibility for the outcome.
You can lead a horse to water.
You can't make him drink. Exactly. The consequences of not studying belong to the child. Your task as a parent is to support, not to control or take over their task.
And you can apply this everywhere, can't you? Your boss is angry. That's his task, his emotion to manage. Your parents disapprove of your choices. Their disapproval is their task.
Their reactions, their judgments, how they feel, that's their business. Your task is to live your life authentically according to your own principles. It's incredibly freeing, but also challenging.
Which leads to maybe the book's most famous or infamous statement. Freedom is being disliked by other people.
That's the cost.
Living by your own principles, separating tasks. It means some people won't like your choices. They won't like that you're not trying to please them.
And the book says the cost of freedom in interpersonal relationships is that one is disliked by other people. The big question it poses to you, the reader, is, can you pay that price? Can you endure being disliked for the sake of your own freedom?
Okay, but freedom through being disliked.
Yeah.
Sounds potentially lonely, right? Where does connection come in?
That's where Adler introduces the ultimate goal, the antidote, community feeling.
Community feeling. Okay, what is that exactly? It sounds a bit vast. The book calls it an unattainable ideal involving the whole universe.
It is vast. It's about seeing yourself as part of a larger whole, connected to everyone and everything. It's about shifting from attachment to self, worrying about how you look, how you're perceived, to concern for others. Genuine social interest.
But wait, isn't being self-conscious or a people pleaser about others?
The book argues that's actually still self-centered. You're obsessed with how others see you. It's still about you. True community feeling is shifting that focus outward, genuinely caring about contributing to the well-being of the community.
It challenges that prince or princess mindset, right? Where you expect the world to revolve around you.
Exactly. You're not the center of the world. The book uses that great analogy. A map versus a globe.
Yeah, on a map, your country looks central. On a globe,
every point can be a center, so no point is the center. You're just one part of a vast community. And belonging isn't given. It's something you build through active contribution.
And how do you encourage that contribution? Not through praise, we establish that.
Right. Instead of praise or rebuke, which the book sees as vertical, top-down, manipulative, Adler promotes encouragement based on horizontal, equal relationships.
Horizontal, meaning?
Seeing others as comrades, not above or below you. And encouragement can be as simple as expressing gratitude, saying thank you.
How does thank you work as encouragement?
It acknowledges the person's contribution, their effort, how they helped. It makes them feel useful, valued for what they did, not just judged on an outcome. It builds their sense of worth from within.
Okay, that makes sense. So this leads us to the final part, living in earnest.
Yeah.
How do we actually cultivate this community feeling and find happiness? The book highlights 3 keys. First is self-acceptance.
Right. And it's crucial to distinguish this from self-affirmation.
What's the difference? Self-affirmation is like telling yourself positive things.
Yeah, like lying to yourself, saying, I'm 100% capable when you know you're maybe at 60%. Self-acceptance, or what the book calls affirmative resignation, is about acknowledging that 60%, honestly.
Accepting reality.
Accepting your is without judgment and then deciding to move forward from there. Not being paralyzed because you're not perfect. The Serenity Prayer captures it perfectly, doesn't it?
Accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can.
And wisdom to know the difference. That's self-acceptance in action. Start from where you actually are.
Okay, second key. Confidence in others. Unconditional confidence. Not just trust based on proof or collateral.
That one's tough.
It really is. Doubting people feels like self-protection sometimes. What if you trust unconditionally and get burned? Taken advantage of.
The book's perspective is radical here. It basically says, if someone takes advantage of your confidence, that's their task, their choice, their issue. Your task, if you want deep relationships and community feeling, is to choose to believe, to have confidence anyway.
Wow. That requires a lot of courage again.
It does. It asks you to lead with an open heart, essentially. It's the only way to build truly deep connections, free from suspicion.
Okay. And the third key?
Contribution to others.
But not self-sacrifice, right?
No, absolutely not. It's about finding ways to act so that you feel, genuinely, I am of use to someone. That feeling of usefulness, of contributing, is what affirms your own worth.
Like the example of doing dishes for your family.
Exactly. If you see them as comrades, part of your community, then doing the dishes isn't a chore you resent. It's a contribution. It makes you feel valuable and connected. It builds your own sense of worth internally.
This ties into another idea. The courage to be normal. Challenging that need to be special.
Yeah, we often think being normal is boring or mediocre. But the book argues that a lot of problem behavior, acting out, seeking attention in negative ways, comes from a desire for easy superiority when being constructively useful feels too hard or doesn't get enough recognition.
So being special can be a trap.
It can be. Accepting your normalcy. Finding value in just being a contributing member without needing flashing lights. That takes real courage. Contentment in just being.
And all this culminates in a really different way of looking at life itself. Not as a line, but as moments. Energial life.
Exactly. Rejecting the climbing the mountain view where you're always en route to some future destination, and most of life is just preparation, a tentative life.
Waiting for life to start.
Right. Instead, energial life means living each moment fully, as if one were dancing right now. The process is the point. The journey itself is the arrival.
So every step is the destination, in a way.
Precisely. You shine a light on the here and now. You do what you can do right now, earnestly, conscientiously. It's not about ignoring the future, but about fully inhabiting the present.
That feels like it could lift a huge weight. Realizing you're not failing if you haven't reached some endpoint.
It makes life complete, always. Whether you live to 20 or 90, if you're living each moment fully, your life is complete in that moment.
But if life isn't aligned to a destination, and it has no inherent meaning, how do you find direction? What's the compass?
That goes back to the third key, contribution to others. That becomes your guiding star.
Ah, okay.
As long as you keep that focus, how can I contribute, you won't lose your way. You can live freely, navigate the present, even if you are disliked sometimes because you have that guiding principle.
And the book's final message seems to be about individual power. If I change, the world will change, not waiting for others.
It puts the power squarely back in your hands. The potential for change starts with you, right now.
So wrapping this up, the courage to be disliked is, well, it calls itself strong medicine.
It definitely is. It's not necessarily comforting in the usual self-help way. It demands courage.
Yeah, it asks you to ditch the excuses, take total responsibility for your happiness, rethink relationships completely, and live right here, right now.
It's a framework that challenges many fundamental assumptions we have about life, trauma, and happiness.
So, for you listening, is this book for you? If these ideas denying trauma's deterministic power, owning your lifestyle, seeing all problems as interpersonal separating tasks, finding freedom in being disliked, aiming for community feeling, living fully in the moment, if these spark your curiosity.
If you're looking for those aha moments, that might really shift your perspective.
Then this deep dive into Adlerian psychology through this book might be exactly the catalyst you need. It offers a very different, potentially empowering path.
It really lays down a gauntlet. It implies the biggest thing holding you back from happiness isn't your past or other people or circumstances.
It's your own lack of courage to change.
Yeah.
So the final question the book leaves you with, and maybe we leave you with today, is what courage will you choose to find today?